It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Well, hello there. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. I am so delighted that you are here. And for the regular listeners, my apologies. It's been more than a week, maybe 10 or 11 days since the last episode. I'm trying to get these out weekly, but it's rough. I got a lot of things on my plate, and we're getting close to Christmas, so maybe one more before then. I don't know. We'll see. I'll do my darndest to get them out there. In this episode, we do have a segment from someone who lost their faith and was willing to share their story with us. And I have a couple more for a couple following shows. So we're going to do a few of those for a while. So hopefully you enjoy those. And one of my main goals is to let these people tell their stories, of course, and interact with them. But also, when they share these stories, there might be somebody listening who is concerned and worried and thinks that they're the only one, they're the only person having these thoughts. And I want them to know that they are not alone. They are not the crazy ones. And that for virtually everyone that leaves religion, life is better on the whole. In the parts where life is not better, it seems like almost all that pain and anxiety comes from the people that are still religious. So if your religion is true and peaceful and better for humanity, why do you have to be such assholes when someone leaves? I mean, really, come on. It just, I think it's common sense. A couple other things in the household here, in the Ferguson household. We do have a new cat. It was delivered yesterday, and it just so turns out through a friend or a friend of a friend, someone had a cat that needed a different home. The person that had the cat was not able to provide for its needs. So we believe it's a 6-year-old cat, and it's a very cuddly cat, at least when it's not hiding, because after it got delivered yesterday, even though it was closed off into a small part of the house, it ended up hiding so well, we could not find it. But overnight, she snuck out and found our daughter and climbed up in the bed and joined her sleeping. So my daughter had a very nice surprise waking up with the cat there, snuggling with her. And it's a very soft cat. So that's kind of nice. We miss out on some of the kitten stuff. And some of that's good to miss out on. So it's a cat that kind of knows how the world works. Maybe a little skittish, but it just moved from one house to another. So that's rough on humans, let alone a cat that we can't really explain to them that this is going to be in their best interest. A skeptically investing segment coming up later in the show. It's a short one today. It's about home ownership or co-ownership. One of the listeners sent me information about an offer that they received where they could sell part of their house to an investor. And this, again, is one of those things that maybe this is a good idea for you. I start from the position of no fucking way. And you have to prove to me that it's better than other options that are available to you. Because if you are struggling with your house payment, maybe you could get a home equity loan, maybe not. Maybe you can refinance the house, maybe not. Maybe you need to move to a smaller house. I don't know. But as far as a lifelong portfolio building, equity building process of living your life, I'm hard to see how this is going to benefit you. So keep that in mind. But if you like the idea of it and you do your research and you're convinced in your case it's a good thing for you to do, fine. But regular listeners know I sound older than I am, I think, with investing. I want it clean. I want it simple. I want it to be things that I understand, things that I fully understand. I know how they work. I know the probabilities, et cetera, et cetera. Another thing that I wanted to address is I received an email about, actually I had two on junk bonds, but one was about CDs, certificates of deposit, and why I don't like them. I don't know that I've said I don't like them. CDs have their place. And for some people, honestly, that might be the best place for their money or for some of their money. CDs pay currently, like almost any reasonably safe to very safe investment, next to nothing. A 1-year CD might be 0.5%. Maybe you can shop around and found something higher. And this listener proposed a ladder. And so in case you don't know, a ladder for CDs, let's say you have $100,000. You put $20,000 in a 1-year CD, $20,000 in a 2-year, and then a 3-year, 4-year, and 5-year. And that gives you access to that 1-year money in 1 year without a penalty. And of course, the 5-year money is locked up for 5 years. You could take it out, but there's a penalty, probably a bigger penalty. And the 5-year CD generally will pay a slightly higher rate. In these low interest times, that really longer rate is maybe a couple of tenths. So instead of 0.5%, you maybe get 0.8 or 0.7. So the difference is not very much. CDs generally, I can't think of a case, but nothing's guaranteed, but they are backed by the bank and by the Federal Reserve, and they're really, really safe. You're not going to make more than the published rate. And if there's fees or tricks or things that the bank put in there, you might even make less than the published rate. But if you want your money in your local bank and you don't want to mess around with a portfolio or opening a brokerage account, a CD is a perfectly reasonable thing to use. Just keep in mind, you're not going to make much. I prefer, and I think this is one of those things where when I talk about what I think is a better way to do something, doesn't mean that your way is wrong. I think there's room for improvement, again, depending on the amount of effort you want to put into it. So if you had, in this case, the $100,000 portfolio, you could split that up and use different bond index funds that I've talked about on the show. Vanguard bond index funds, there's many, many of them. And I would recommend that the bulk, 75% of that bond money be put in very conservative, very safe and boring, and very short-term bond index funds. And you might make 1%, you might make 2%. You might lose 1 or 2%. The odds of that are low, but I have to explain that because I don't want someone to come in and say, you didn't tell me I could lose 2% in my short-term bond fund. It could happen. I don't think the probability is high, but it could happen. With the other 25 to 30% of your bond portfolio, if you want, you can take some more risk with junk bonds, emerging market, and just international bonds, high-quality international bonds around the world. And those things might make, especially the emerging markets and or junk bonds, in a given year, you might make 10, 12, 15%. However, in general rule of thumb, if you can make 10 or 15%, you can lose 10 or 15%. And in March of 2020, wow, almost 2 years ago, it's hard to believe, junk bonds in general, when the market fell 30 plus, junk bonds fell 20 to 25%. So you want it to be a very small part of your portfolio. If that safer part of your portfolio, that kind of volatility freaks you out, then don't buy the junk bond fund. It's not that junk bond funds are bad. What I have a concern with, and I'm restating this because apparently I failed to be clear, and I'm going to own that because I got 2 emails on this subject. I don't hate junk bonds. What I hate is when people come to me and show me a portfolio that is 50% stock, and 50% bond, and they think that their portfolio is quite conservative because it's 50% bond. But when you look at either the individual bonds that they have or the managed funds or even the index funds, when you have 70, 80, 90% of all of your bonds are junk bonds, you do not have a conservative fucking portfolio. That may be what you want. You may understand and may be willing and you may wish to try to make 8 to 10% per year on high volatility, high risk junk bonds. That's cool. If that's what you want, do it. But what I find in most cases, a person that has a 50% bond fund, the bond funds that they have are heavily skewed towards long-term, which I'm avoiding because of the potential for interest rates to increase, and high risk, high volatility, AKA junk bonds that have a nasty habit of falling when the stock market falls. Again, if you understand that and you don't want to make 2% and you want to try to make 5% in your bonds, cool. That's an option for you. Most people that have half of their portfolio in bonds are doing it with the intent of avoiding the volatility that stocks bring. You've failed on that mission. And so if stocks go down, those junk bonds can go down. So I have no problem with you owning as much junk bonds as you want. But you better understand what they are, how they work. And if you don't want to lose 20 or 30% of your bond portfolio in a very short period of time, stick with mostly very short-term and very secure bonds like high-quality corporate bonds and high-quality short-term U.S. government bonds. Maybe some Ginnie Maes. It's a big part of the bulk, the 70, 75% of your money. And like I said, the 25 to 30%, if you are willing to stomach it, and you could end up in a situation where in a given year, you might make 2 or 3% in the bonds, but the more you put into risky bonds, the more likely, if there's a big correction or a change in bonds, the more you could lose in bonds. But again, you might lose 2 or 3% if it's conservatively invested. And in that situation where you're losing money, there's a possibility that the market fell 30%. And when we have a year like 2021, where so far the S&P 500 is up, I don't know, today, I haven't checked. I don't normally look at this. In the mid-20s, upper 20s, 25, 26, 27% year to date. Money that's in a bond fund making 1 or 2% can look stupid. No doubt about it. Absolutely no doubt about it. However, if you get a situation like '08 or a situation like 99, 2000, 2001, where the market can fall 20, 30, 37, 40% or more in a year or two, making 2% on the upside looks fucking genius. And the most important part for people in retirement for the cushion is that is a place where you can take out money and not have to sell stocks while the market is down. Because every time so far, and I have no way of knowing for sure that the future will behave the same way, that is true. But based on all the evidence that I've seen, particularly in the U.S. stock market, when the U.S. stock market falls considerably, whether it's a year or 2 or 3, within 7 years, it always comes back. And so your cushion needs to be long enough, big enough to continuously sell bonds if you need them. All right, that wasn't even meant to be a whole segment, but junk bonds are okay in moderation. Just don't get carried away with it. If you really wanted to have long-term bond fund, like a U.S. government long-term bond index fund from Vanguard, you can do that, but be aware. The thing you want to look for in any bond fund is the duration. And the duration gives you a quick and easy way to approximate the effect of interest rate fluctuations. So if you were in a long-term U.S. Government bond fund that has a duration of 18, if interest rates go up 1%, your fund could fall 18%. That's kind of the gist of how that works in one calendar year. The Fed may choose to not increase its overnight lending rate. There is that possibility. But that's just one interest rate that they have some control over. What people are willing to pay for U.S. long-term bonds is up to the market. The Fed does not set the interest rate. What the Fed does, or what the government does, is they issue bonds and they put them out to an auction. Now, you have to have special privileges and millions and tens of millions of dollars to go buy from that initial offering, but that dictates the price the bonds are sold for, and then you can calculate what the effective interest rate is. So as long as people think that the United States is one of the better places to invest safely, the interest rates on those bonds is going to be low. With inflation being a possibility, I don't think it's going to be anything crazy, but maybe 5% for this year, maybe 5% next year. And keeping in mind, in 2020, inflation was close to zero. So when you average even over 2 or 3 years, it's still not that much above 3%, which is the norm, or 2%, which we've had the advantage of for a decade maybe. So inflation might be a little higher. Someone might want to pay a little bit less for the bonds to get a slightly better return or better return rate, and poof, the interest rates, the effective interest rates for the marketplace are higher. And so if you're locked into a 20-year bond, it becomes less valuable. I don't know. Just keep that in mind. Some things that I wanted to touch on. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to hear about co-home ownership. And then we're going to hear someone who has left their religion and the story and part of the drama that became their life because of religion. So hang in there. We'll be right back.
Reverend Mesa, Reverend Rock, I'm grateful for your generous invitation to state my views. While the so-called religious issue is necessarily and properly the chief topic here tonight, I want to emphasize from the outset that I believe that we have far more critical issues in the 1960 campaign. The spread of communist influence until it now festers only 90 miles from the coast of Florida, the humiliating treatment of our president and vice president by those who no longer respect our power, the hungry children I saw in West Virginia, the old people who cannot pay their doctor's bills, the families forced to give up their farms, an America with too many slums, with too few schools, and too late to the moon and outer space. These are the real issues which should decide this campaign. And they are not religious issues. For war and hunger and ignorance and despair, no religious barrier. But because I am a Catholic, and no Catholic has ever been elected president, the real issues in this campaign have been obscured, perhaps deliberately, in some quarters less responsible than this. So it is apparently necessary for me to state once again, not what kind of church I believe in, for that should be important only to me, but what kind of America I believe in. I believe in an America where the separation of church and state is absolute, where no Catholic prelate would tell the president, should he be Catholic, how to act, and no Protestant minister would tell his parishioners for whom to vote, where no church or church school is granted any public funds or political preference, and where no man is denied public office merely because his religion differs from the president who might appoint him or the people who might elect him. I believe in an America that is officially neither Catholic, Protestant, nor Jewish, where no public official either requests or accepts instructions on public policy from the Pope, the National Council of Churches, or any other ecclesiastical source, where no religious body seeks to impose its will, directly or indirectly, upon the general populace or the public acts of its officials, and where religious liberty is so indivisible that an act against one church is treated as an act against all. For while this year it may be a Catholic against whom the finger of suspicion is pointed, in other years it has been, and may someday be again, a Jew, or a Quaker, or a Unitarian, or a Baptist. It was Virginia's harassment of Baptist preachers, for example, that led to Jefferson's Statute of Religious Freedom. Today I may be the victim, but tomorrow it may be you. Until the whole fabric of our harmonious society is ripped apart at a time of great national peril. Finally, I believe in an America where religious intolerance will someday end, where all men and all churches are treated as equals, where every man has the same right to attend or not to attend the church of his choice, where there is no Catholic vote, no anti-Catholic vote, no block voting of any kind, and where Catholics, Protestants, and Jews, at both the lay and the pastoral levels, will refrain from those attitudes of disdain and division which have so often marred their works in the past, and promote instead the American ideal of brotherhood. That is the kind of America in which I believe.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
There's always new stuff, people. Always new stuff. And a show listener sent this to me. Oh, when did they send it? It's been a couple of weeks, maybe a month or more. And sometimes I set things aside and get to them, and sometimes I not get to them. But this one I'm getting to. It's apparently shared home ownership. So if you own a house and you need money, you can split your ownership between yourself and this company. I guess it won't hurt to mention Unison. Never heard of them. Whatever. But they will give you money, and you have to agree to give them a part ownership in your house. Not quite sure. I guess, I'd still think that if you really needed money out of your house, you could move to a more affordable house, especially if housing values are up. Or you could get some kind of home equity loan or a line of credit against your house, which they kind of have the right to foreclose on your house if you can't pay your home equity, your conventional loan, or your home second mortgage, equity loan, whatever we want to call it. I mean, your house is still on the chopping block because you didn't pay 100% for it. So you don't really own it outright. So you have that risk. So I don't know how this is different other than it's new and it's complicated and it's a way for people to play tricks. In the letter, they stress that you're not taking on any debt, where a home equity or even a second home loan line of credit is debt. This is not debt, according to them, but it might be a semantics thing where it won't show up on your credit report as debt. But of course, if you don't have good credit, they're not going to do this anyway because you're a risk and they may not ever get paid back. So there's some questions and answers here. And of course, they have a little box here that they're featured on different TV and news stations and websites, whatever, as featured in. Maybe they paid to have a sponsor written post, which happens way more often than I'd like it to happen in the world, but people got to make money. So they might sponsor it because one of them is Bloomberg. Okay, as featured in Bloomberg. Great. Does that mean you bought an ad on Bloomberg? Does that mean you were a guest on one of their shows that you might have contributed to? Does it mean you wrote a post for their webpage? I don't know. It doesn't say. So in this case, let's see here, they are suggesting an investment of about $104,000. And the second page has some extra details. And of course, somewhere when you really get interested in this, you have to read and agree to and sign a really long contract, which I don't have. And even if I had it, I don't think I would read it because it'd hurt my head. But certain things that it has on here: annual fee, none. Well, that's nice. Appraisal fee from $450 to $1,250. I'm guessing you, as the current inhabitant of the home and partial owner, because the bank owns it, you're going to pay that. So you're out $1,000 there. Title, escrow, and closing fees from $700 to $1,750. So you're out maybe $1,000 for the appraisal and another $1,500 for fees. So you're out $2,500 before you even get started. And then there's this transaction fee 3% of Unison home co-investment. So in the case that they have a house that's worth or appraised for currently $400,000. The next thing that they do is they say the starting value for the calculation of the appreciation of the equity in the home is going to be reduced by 2.5%. Wait, what? That's just like a fee so they make more money. That's clever. I like it. I mean, for them, it's great. So in this case, if a home is valued at $400,000, the number we're going to start with for the shared ownership is not $400,000 as it was appraised. It's $390,000. So after you sign it, if the price of the house never goes up or never goes down, it's always worth it's always worth $400,000 as it was appraised. Right off the bat, you would owe them back the $100,000 that they lent you, they invested with you. Anyway, at some point, they're going to want the $100,000 back. We all know that. That's straightforward. They're going to want the $100,000 back. And in this case, another $10,000, because if the house was worth $400,000 and it stays and it's always worth $400,000 and you sell it at some point for $400,000, the calculation starts from it being worth an adjusted amount of $390,000. So you would owe them the entire $100,000 back plus $10,000 plus the 3% co-investment fee, which is hysterical. So that's another $3,000 plus the, $2,000, we'll call it, the $2,000 to have the appraisal and go through the escrow and the closing and everything if there's not anything else hidden there. So you have $2,000 there, $3,000 there, $10,000 there. So you're at $15,000. You're $15,000 in the hole on day one. So on a $400,000 house, well, actually, I'm going to compare it to a $100,000 loan. You're out $15,000. That's 15% cost to start to play the game. So if you could have gotten a home equity loan at 3 or 4%, let's even call it 5%, you could have borrowed that money for multiple years, kept all of the increased value in your house, and still be equal to or ahead of this process. So, it doesn't sound inherently evil. I'm always worried that there's little tricks. And one of those tricks, like I said, is that your house is worth $400,000. And so if the house is $400,000 and the starting value for the ownership equity is $390,000, if they give you $100,000, I guess they own $100,000 out of the $390,000. What is that? It's about 25%. Does that mean they get 25% of the home appreciation? Because they never detailed that. Because in this example, several years later, you sell the house for $490,000, and the adjusted value to start was $390,000. It sold for $490,000, so clearly the house had a gain of $100,000, and it simply says that they share in that change in value. It would lead me to believe, in a world of fairness, that if they own 25% of the house, they would get 25% of the change in value, in this case, $100,000, or they would get $25,000 plus the $100,000 that you have to give them back from the beginning. And of course, all the fees are already gone. But it never says that they get exactly the percentage of what they put in. So that would be a place in the contract where they might say, that if they invest 25%, they get 33% of the gain. So do we get $33,000, not $25,000? I don't know. I haven't seen the contract. So let's see. Frequently asked questions. How do I know if I can trust you? Well, that's a really good question. Here's their answer. Founded in 2006, we are A+ rated. We are A+ rated with the Better Business Bureau. That has way less meaning than you think it does, but okay, great. Have been featured in USA Today. Okay, blah, 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 all these magazines, articles. We've now helped 8,000 people. So that's useless. If I partner with Unison, who owns the house? You own the home! ! You control the property and receive the benefit of home ownership, such as occupancy rights, income tax deduction. Unison is not the owner and has no rights to occupancy. We share a portion of the future change in values as an investor. That sounds neat. What happens if I make home improvement? Oh, so there's a process where if you make a home improvement, for example, you remodel your kitchen, or you add on a back room or a swimming pool, or tear down your single car garage and make it a double car garage, that will be done, that will be adjusted through a process they have where an independent third-party appraiser will come and calculate how much the value of the home has increased because of these home improvements, and it will be adjusted. But of course, that's going to have a lot of caveats and details. And of course, on the front page, they said that they're going to share in the gains or the losses with you. However, there is a caveat here that if you sell within the first 3 years, I think it is. Let's see. Yeah, I don't remember where I read that. Within the first 3 years, they can't lose. So if for some reason something bad happens and goes wrong, and you need to sell your house, you need to move, and you need to move at the same time that home values go down, they don't share that with you. So you would still owe them everything you owe them. You would owe them back the $100,000 they lent you. You, of course, would owe them the $10,000 that they adjusted down your $400,000 house at the beginning of the process, and you'd still be out all of the fees. So that could be really annoying. I don't know. I mean, that's just some thoughts and details about this. There's more little footnotes here, and of course, you could probably research them. Here's one of the footnotes. Unison will not share in any decreased value if you sell your house within 5 years of our investment. So there's that. And then, of course, there's some different processes for if you decide to end this program, you could pay back what you owe, the $100,000, plus whatever portion of the increased equity that you agreed to after an independent third-party appraiser, and who knows what other kind of hidden fees or calculations or whatever's in there. So just something to think about.
Never felt the slightest interest in the next world. I think it's here, and I think anything good that you're going to do, you should do for other people here, and not do anything to make yourself have a happy time in the next world, you know. No, I don't believe in religion. If you can live for other people away from yourself, you will be happy. And if you live for yourself, you will be unhappy, and you will then not be able to sleep or do anything else. After all, we have no notion as to what the next world is, if there is one. Mm-hmm. So there's no point in that. But it's always been, I hear a lot of people saying, well, I don't know the difference between good and bad. I know totally, for myself, the difference between right and wrong. Totally. Uh-huh. I know this because wrong makes me very uncomfortable and right makes me very happy. And I don't think it's so very difficult to know when you're doing the right thing and when you're doing the wrong thing. And I think each person, the right thing, the wrong thing varies.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Your investments should be based on your situation, and you should consult with your financial advisor before taking any action. The show may contain ads. These ads are placed into the show by the hosting company after I finish recording and editing. I have little control over the content of the ads, and you should not assume that I support their products or claims. If you choose to support the show via the new Patreon page, that support does not create an advisor-client relationship. All right, everybody. Next up, I have one of the segments I really like to do, and it's been a while, is where I talk to somebody who has left their faith, left their religion. I guess leaving your religion, because leaving your faith, to me, I don't even know what the fuck that means. But anyway, I digress. With me today is Emil. How are you today?
Doing well.
Excellent.
Good to be here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing this story. And I think what I want to do is say that you were born in Germany, but I mean, if you want to shout out the country your family came from, it makes perfect sense. But your family was immigrants, and they were running from persecution and possible death. Does that seem too dramatic, or is that about right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and you end up in Germany, and were you born in Germany?
Yeah. I was born in Munich, Germany.
And how is your German? Is it pretty good?
Yeah, sehr gut. I can speak a little bit and understand it much better.
So you've had to learn a little German because you're born there, but then at the age of 8, your family moved to California.
Mm-hmm.
And how was your exposure to English? What English did you know before you showed up?
Not much. My parents got me a translation book with some pictures and English to German. Words and things like that, and that helped me a little bit, but mostly I learned from TV and children, playing with kids in my neighborhood. My uncle said he'd never seen anyone learn English so quickly, and I think in about 2 weeks' time I was, if not fluent, as good as an 8-year-old can speak.
Yeah. Wow. Well, good. Do you know other languages?
I do. So we didn't touch on it earlier, but I'll say freely that I am Bosnian by ethnicity. So I do speak pretty good Bosnian conversationally around the house with my parents and with my family.
Sure. And why did your family leave Bosnia? What was going on?
So in the early 90s, there was a war that broke out in Bosnia. I don't know too much of the details, but most of there was a lot of ethnic cleansing that was going on.
And ethnic cleansing is a polite way to say genocide? Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. There was an invasion, and a large Muslim population country, Bosnia, was invaded by one of their neighboring countries, and they were trying to genocide or eradicate all of the Muslims, from what I understand.
Yeah.
And my parents, my mother being pregnant at the time with me, fled the country as a war refugee.
Right.
And they went to Germany.
Wow. That's a rough start, dude. That, your family is running from the fear of death, and from what we've talked about before, you did have family members that died during that time. Is that correct?
Yeah. Both of my grandfathers were in the war, and they didn't make it out. When in certain countries in Europe, there's mandatory military service. My father was in the military for 2 years, but he was given the option of leaving after that, so he did. But when the war broke out, he was, from what I understand, they needed more bodies, more people, and
right.
My dad didn't want to have any of that. So they left, started a new life, and now I live in California.
And also in your story, you tell me about, being in California, and you picked up English pretty quick. You started to get pretty interested in STEM, science, technology, that kind of stuff. And also, you were having doubts about your religion. What was your religion?
Yeah. My religion was Muslim growing up. And that was more, I don't want to say forced on me, but by habit, kind of by association.
Yeah, because
I took on.
Sure, your family was mostly Muslim, so I mean, You know, a lot of people in the United States grow up in a Christian family, so it's just assumed or compelled that you're Christian, and that was kind of the same thing with you, I'm guessing.
Hmm. Yeah, and I could sense it a lot more when I was around my family, that the influence was there. And when I was out in the world, in Germany and in America, there was definitely a culture clash that I could tell, and it's because of that Christian influence in those nations, in the Western nations like that.
Sure.
So there was lots of exposure to other religions, like Christianity and Judaism and Buddhism, all of them, and even other mythologies that I really like to study, like the Greek and the Roman deities and things like that. So in school, I had a lot of a wide variety of subjects that I liked, that I studied. And that really helped me growing up to understand concepts like evolution and being able to decipher certain paradoxes that would be too difficult to, I don't want to say otherwise,
Yeah.
but it's I can't understate the importance of my education and how it helped me understand these scientific concepts that really just eroded the religious concept of my life.
And would it be fair to say that for someone like you,
Yeah.
the exposure to different languages, different cultures, different religions, all of that, makes sense, but it kind of lessens the significance, the importance of one specific piece, because if everybody is different, that means everybody else is probably not believing the exact same thing that you did. Does that drive kind of a cognitive dissonance?
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
fair. And you started learning about science, and you had questions about your religion. How did that go? Is it just one day you're like, hey, this is silly, or did you struggle?
Oh, I struggled a lot, especially with certain rules and things that you're not supposed to question.
Right.
So I would definitely struggle, and there was really, like you mentioned, everyone is different, and growing up with my upbringing, there was I was kind of taught an animosity, or like to kind of this tribalism was brought up in me, of like anyone who's different, especially because my parents' country was invaded by, let's say, Christians, and they thought, oh, they were different,
Right.
and now I have to. Yeah, that was kind of instilled in me, but I always questioned that. Is like, why? Because there's other beliefs out there, so why do we take ours so ingrain it so deeply and treat everyone like others? And
Sure. Now, that's all good. You left Germany around the age of 8, went to California, and you're 19. We jump ahead a little bit in the story, and I'm assuming you had either last year or two of high school, or you were just out of high school starting something else. 19, and you heard about a cousin that didn't believe in God. Walk us through that.
Yeah, that summer I went to Germany for my cousin's wedding.
Nice.
And we were having some discussion, me and the wedding party, all the groomsmen and the bridesmaids. We were talking about ghosts. This was one of the days before the wedding. We were all drinking and having fun, and then my cousin kind of I noticed her not getting into the story, and it finally came out that she was an atheist. She didn't believe. And that sent me down the path of asking more and more questions, and I eventually became an atheist as well.
Did you know what an atheist was before then? Or is that not even really an option in your world?
I want to say I did know, but I can't say for certain.
Yeah.
I just thought you had to have a religion of sorts.
Yeah, that's very common.
You have to believe in a book. And there's thousands to choose from. I didn't know that none was an option.
Now, did your cousin help you in any way with your journey, or was it just a moment of inflection where all of a sudden it's like, wait, there's a different option here, that it might all not be true?
I think that's the one. The
Yeah.
new option of I'd never explored this this option.
And you also mentioned you started getting more on YouTube, and what kind of stuff did you find there?
Oh, I'd always liked stand-up comedy.
Nice.
From an early age, from my teens. So I really liked the satirical and the stylings of George Carlin, Jim Jeffries, Ricky Gervais, those guys who they would be a little snarky and
A little
sarcastic
yeah.
towards the religion, and that style just resonated with me so much that it stuck with me. And as well as the comedy, I liked the Atheist Experience.
Okay.
I started watching that. I can't exactly remember when, but it was only a matter of time until I came across the cleverly titled Phil Ferguson Show.
You're very kind.
And I haven't stopped watching since.
Sure. Now, on the Atheist Experience, I'm just curious, what did you like about that? Was it the format? Was it the style? Were you learning how to argue? Did you like philosophy? What worked for you?
I like the argumentation style.
Okay.
And the call-in style. It was more, it wasn't a scholarly with heady concepts to deliberate and to think about. It was regular, everyday people putting out their ideas. And when you have somebody who's able to eloquently dismantle those concepts, it was just eye-opening for me, because I had never been able to put together what I felt, as well as all the wonderful hosts that they have there. So it was really fantastic, and it kept me learning on how to deal with these objections when they come up.
Yep.
And I started internalizing those arguments and kind of having them within myself.
Right. Very common.
And eventually, that's it.
That's it. The other thing you mentioned on YouTube, hitch slap. For those who don't know, what is a hitch slap?
So Christopher Hitchens was a wonderful British novelist.
Yeah.
And journalist who was, from what I think, a self-proclaimed anti-theist.
That seems fair.
In the sense that he thought that religion does more harm than good.
Right.
On the whole. And so He was a major proponent of atheism, and many of the arguments and debates he had iconic moments. Sometimes memes are born out of these situations, and one of the best words we've come up with is hitch slap.
Right.
Is Hitchens' iconic argument, one of several that just it's quite the slap. I don't I don't know.
Yeah.
It
so
slaps hard.
I'm sure a lot of my listeners know what this means specifically, but if you're listening and you've never heard hitch slap before, do yourself a favor, go to YouTube and just type in hitch slap. It can be one word or two, and it's often where Hitchens is discussing or debating with a religious person, and the religious person says something that they perceive to be profound support for their worldview. And Hitchens would be so creative and so brutal in his polite vocabulary where he would just dismantle what was just said as the childish fodder that it was, that you kind of like are like, damn, I almost feel bad for the person he's talking to, but everything he says is so correct and so straightforward and simple to understand. You have to wonder, how does the other person survive that and maintain their beliefs? But they sometimes do, often do. Mm-hmm. How is your family now? Are things cool? Everyone accepted your lack of religion? Relatives, parents? What's going on there?
My mother has been one of the biggest support systems in my life. I think she's the first person that I went to when I found this out about myself.
Right.
And I'll never forget, she said, I'll love you no matter what. So that just, and I was raised with that kind of support.
That's nice.
Yeah. So, and she's someone who I think respects all religions as well. So, it was nice to have that.
Yeah, that's a support that not everybody has. I just couldn't help but thinking that, I don't know how you phrased it, but she supports or likes all religions or accepts them as being valid. I would say that I value them equally to each other, which is not valued. But that's me. That's not your story. And so you have some people in your family that are relatively close that know and things are going okay. Do you think that you see a brighter future for your life by being not religious than you did by being religious?
Yes, absolutely.
And how so? Walk me through. Give me some ideas.
Whew.
I know, right?
Well, it's very restricting. These dogmas,
right?
They're some of the rules that they have. They're not based in anything. So, as far as I can tell, and it's restricting. It's limiting as far as to what you can do if you believe certain things, because your beliefs inform your actions. And if you believe that you're going to be punished for, I don't know, eating a certain thing or doing something with a person who you love, and it's against the rules arbitrarily, it's like I said, it's restricting. You feel bound, like caged, but for no reason.
Yeah, fair enough.
So,
if someone is listening that is struggling with their religion, what would you say? Should they keep struggling through it and go for the truth, or should they stop and just enjoy being bound up, as you said?
No, absolutely fight and fight through it. If you have questions and they make you uncomfortable, just there's a reason that you're uncomfortable, and you need to work that out and figure out why it is that you believe what you believe, and how did you realize that it's true.
I like that, because one of the things that affected me when I was young was the more, and this still affects me today, the more I learn about religion or religions, the more confusing and difficult and challenging it becomes. But the more I learn about science and how the world works, the more sense it makes. And I find a great comfort in the fact that when I learn more, I understand the world better. Where with religion, sometimes when you learn more, it's just more chaos.
I agree.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Well, is there anything we didn't cover that you'd want to talk about, or any last thoughts before we wrap up? Because I don't want to take all day from you.
Not at the moment. If there's anything else you want to ask me, I'd be more than happy to fill in the gaps.
I appreciate it, but I think this is a beautiful segment that we did, and it works as it is. And so I'll just thank you so much for sharing your time and being part of my little teeny podcast.
Oh, I'm so grateful. Thank you for having me on.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. I greatly appreciate it. I have gotten a delightfully large amount of emails of appreciation and love, whatever, that liked my segment on me going to hear about annuities. And I went in person and the golf place thingy. And I tried something different where I walked through the documents and kind of clustered them and shared some of my thoughts as they occurred when reviewing the documents. And I was worried that would be painfully boring, but maybe the people that thought it was terrible and boring didn't bother to write me. And if that's the case, I'm sorry you didn't enjoy it. But I did get a lot of email from people who thought that was just amazing because it helped them kind of know what to look for, what to think about, how to compare and contrast. Because even though the little session I went to was an hour, less than an hour of promotional activity where, of course, they do feed you and give you drinks, which is nice. You know, they want to be your friend. But it was very nice. But they, of course, do their job, which is to encourage you, to convince you that what they have to sell is fantastic. And, of course, they will always tell you the good things, and they might kind of skip over bad things. And it's not that they're hiding it per se, but it's in the contract that you'll never read. And even as a advisor, I wouldn't have to read it. I would just have to tell you and repeat the good things. I might not even know the bad things, which just this week, someone mentioned it back to me, the phrase that I use. So some people it's clicking with. A salesperson doesn't really need to fully understand the product. They need to sell the product. That's their job. That's what they get paid for. They don't take tests to prove that they know all the details. Their test is their commission. And when they convince you to buy an annuity, they get paid. That is their job. I don't begrudge them that job just on purpose. A lot of people do great things with commission sales jobs, and I've had them in the past and made some money at it, but they don't have to know the details and the actuality of what they're selling. And that's one of the unfortunate large parts of the industry, is there's a lot of people selling things. So you want to make sure that you have someone who is a fiduciary and gets paid only by you. That's critically important, because in my case, I only get paid by my clients with Polaris Financial Planning. So I want to make you happy. Kind of jokingly, I want to make you happy enough that you won't go through the hassle and effort of moving to somewhere else. But hopefully it's some level above that level of satisfaction for most people. Speaking of other things with the show, I do have a Patreon page patreon.com/Phil. I am going to soon end that Patreon page for some concerns that I have over possible regulatory issues, where if someone is contributing there, could it be deemed as them paying money to then get advice? So if someone is a patron and contributes money to the show, and then they call me and say, Phil, what do you think about this? If I then give them opinions, one could, I guess, theoretically tie the fact that I received money from this person and then I gave them advice, but we never executed a contract. I don't think it's likely to be a problem, but I don't even want to deal with something that is unlikely to be a problem. So I've already stopped charging anyone and everyone that goes to Patreon. If you've put in that you're going to donate or contribute money, you will no longer be contributing any money. Now, there might be some legacy issue or some show that I haven't been paid on yet that was from a couple of weeks ago. But here's what I'd like to ask you to do if you've been so kind and generous to go to patreon.com/Phil. Go there and turn off your contribution. However that works, I don't know. But go turn off your contribution and give that money to someone else. Thankfully, I don't need it. Unfortunately, I don't want it because of the potential conflict. So go ahead and go to Patreon. In the last week and a half, more than half of the people who are patrons left. And while it hurts me to say that a little bit, I think they've gone to a better place. So go give money to someone else that is making content that you like, someone else you want to support and keep hearing or seeing more of their stuff. Whoever you want, your money, you do what you want. So there's that. The other thing is that just as a reminder, because of my uncertainty over the exact process that is going to be necessary going forward in relationship to 401ks and 401ks rolling over to an IRA, at this time, I will no longer be able to give complimentary advice on your 401k. And that means whether you're a client or not a client. I am researching and talking with my legal counsel and my regulatory company that helps me file every year. And it seems like every year it gets more and more complicated. But I'm going over a couple of options. One is the possibility that I could give you advice if you're an existing client in your 401k, 403b, TSP, whatever, if you pay me. So that removes that weird conflict. But if you're someone who is not a client and you say, hey, Phil, here's my 401k, here's the details, which, I'm so frustrated by this. Forgive me for a moment. A big driver of what I do and the show is to give out information for free. And a small percentage of the people that get information for free then hire me. That has worked very well. It is not my intention. Well, maybe it's not. It's not my desire to change that model. However, if at some point you contact me, whether you're a client or not a client, and I give you guidance, suggestions, recommendations, whatever on your 401k, and I don't bill you, which I have historically done as a courtesy, as a complimentary thing, a way of paying back to anyone who wants more information. That very process can then turn around and put me in regulatory jeopardy, because if you then want to move the money from a 401k to an IRA that I manage, first of all, from the Department of Labor, they call it a prohibited transaction unless I file for an exception, and I have to document the pros and the cons and make a case for why it's still in your best interest. That's going to be the new big buzzwords for going forward. It's in your best interest. Now, already I am, Polaris Financial Planning is at least, a fiduciary. So it's already in the fucking definition. It's in the contract that people sign with me. And so I think this is redundant of a process. And until I'm sure how crazy the FINRA or the SEC or the federal government in general is going to be on these rules, I am taking the overly cautious approach. If it changes, if I come up with a way to make it perfectly clear and safe for me, then I would love to go back to the point where I can say, hey, you're not a client? That's cool. Just email me. We'll talk, and then you can send me your 401k, and I'll give you suggestions for free. I am not in a position right now where I'm going to choose to not do that. I'm not saying that I can't, but I'm concerned. And maybe that concern is lack of information, which I'm trying to work on resolving. And the rule has been new, and it's not even been fully monitored, fully audited, but that starts in January of 2022. So just a little bit ahead of schedule here. I'm just not doing that anymore, and I apologize. If you are a client and you want me to continue to include your 401k in my thoughts as a process for my rebalancing of what you have at TD Ameritrade and what you're under contract with Polaris for, that's cool. At any time you can say, oh, by the way, Phil, here is the information on my 401k, and this is for clients. Because if you're not a client, I'm not going to do anything with that information. But if you're a client and you haven't sent me information in your 401k, 403b, TSP, if you haven't done it in the last year, you probably should contact me and say, Phil, I want to give you an updated statement, just so I have the more accurate, better information. I can then look at that information. Nothing wrong with me looking at that information, and then I can decide what to do with your other investments if a rebalance is warranted at all. But what I cannot do at this point in time is say, you have 50% in this fund, I want it to be 45%. You have 5% in this other fund, and I want you to change that to 10%. That I can no longer do at the time being, and for the reasons I've discussed. I just want to mention this a few times over different segments so that it's a change. It's not necessarily a change that I like. The one other thing that I would like you to consider, again, I've mentioned this, but it's been a few shows. If you're 15 or more years from retirement, in my opinion, you should be 100% stocks. Now, if you want 3 or 5 or 10% in bonds, just as a hedge for the future, fine. 10% in bonds doesn't pull down your return a ton, but it does create a drag on your overall performance. But when we have a good year where the market's up 20%, that will change it very little. However, if you are 15 years or less from retirement, you should start thinking about building the cushion. And because we have had so many good years in a row, I think that you should be maybe a little bit more conservative than you have been. Now, I don't want you to hear that and say, oh my God, I'm 20% in bonds now. Tomorrow I'm going to 50% bonds. That's not what I'm talking about. When you're 15 years out, you start building the bond portfolio. Maybe historically, I would have said had 2 to 3%, 4%, 5% in bonds because you're 15 years from retirement. If you now want to start with 10%, I'm okay with that because we've had so many good years. Scrape off some of the cream, some of the profits that you've made, and protect it. Just a small amount. Don't get crazy. Don't overhear what I'm saying. Don't put it to an extreme that the sky is falling. If you are 10 years from retirement, and historically you might have half of the cushion that you need by 10 years out, maybe you should have 60% or 65%. Way back in the past, I would normally tell people to have their cushion fully ready 3 years before retirement. I then changed it to 4, and then I changed it to 5. If you want to have your cushion fully built 6 years before your retirement now, I'm okay with that. So we're talking about a shift, 2, 3, 4, 5% more than what you may have had. I've talked to a lot of clients, and we've already done this because one of the things that I do is that people who are paying me, clients, can share and enjoy my opinions and ideas, and hopefully on the average they're better than not, but before the listener gets it for free. But think about that. Think about your portfolio. Think about when you're going to retire and look. And hopefully, if you had a lot of stock index funds, you've made a lot of fucking money in the last couple of years. I'm talking serious percentage returns. Understand that is not normal. And I'll do a longer thing on this after the first of the year when I have all of the numbers in and how all the different segments of the investing world have done. But in general, particularly for most of my listeners and most of my clients that are U.S. based and have a primarily U.S. stock index funds, you've made a lot of money. Come on, own up to it. You've made a lot of money. Scraping 5% off the top and putting it in something that makes 1 or 2% sounds painfully boring, but don't be a greedy fucking pig, right? Do reasonable actions. If the market had fallen 30%, like say in the next 30 days, not a prediction, please. This is just fantasy for the point of discussion. If the market fell 30% in the next 30 days and you had money laying around, I might be much more interested in investing it, in adding it to stocks. But right now, if you're getting closer to retirement, think about a small shift, 3 to 5% more in your bond portfolio than what you need. And maybe if you guys want, I can redo a segment, it's been a while, on exactly how to calculate the cushion. Because for me, I do it in years, not as a percentage of the portfolio, but it's so easy to discuss percentages as a generic idea, because it's easy to look at your portfolio and say, I have 25 or 30% in bonds. If you are currently using mutual funds, managed mutual funds, even bond or index mutual funds like a target date fund, be careful that you pay attention to the percentage in that fund that is stocks and bond. For example, if you have a value and income or an income fund, all these words, by the way, have no legal meaning. They're just marketing. But you can go to Morningstar.com, type in whatever fund you want. You can look at all of the funds that you have and look at one. If you thought it was 100% stock, but it's 30% bonds, okay, take that into account. Build your spreadsheet and make sure you indicate that 30% of the money in that fund is, at least as of the date of the update from Morningstar, 30% in bonds. One of the problems I have with managed bond funds is that they can change. And so they think 30% bonds is cool, and then they decide 50% is cool, and you just had a dramatic increase in your holdings that are in bonds, and you may not be aware of it at all because you didn't go rebuild the fund every month at Morningstar.com. So, oh my God, 15 minutes of this. I apologize. Good fun. If you're a patron, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. If you've been a patron, thank you. Go turn it off. Don't send me any more money through Patreon. I'm not going to charge for shows there. And in a few weeks, I'm going to turn it off. And I don't want you to lose access to the show. So go find and sign up for the Phil Ferguson Show at some other platform. The biggest is Apple Podcasts, I think it's called now. It's the single biggest platform, but there are hundreds of other things that aren't Apple. So whatever you use, go search The Phil Ferguson Show. Make sure you subscribe, please. That would be helpful to me so the numbers don't go down. But I don't want you to just go, gosh, I haven't heard from Phil in months, because you were counting on the shows being on Patreon. And matter of fact, that might be a reason to leave Patreon open, just in case you're way behind and you get to these shows several months from now. I'll have to think about that. It doesn't hurt me. I don't think it is a problem just to leave it there and continually add messages to go away. But anyway, I'm looking forward to next year, and hopefully Omicron doesn't get too crazy. Get vaccinated, please. Get your backup, your third vaccination, your booster, whatever we're going to call it, and make sure you're safe. Still wear a face mask, I guess, in public areas. And hopefully in 2022, I can go out on the road and maybe go to some conferences, and I'd love to see you there. If you see me at one of these events, please feel free to come up and say hello. Until then, ciao.